strength sports are just such a macho arena, and we're all just like, hi, I'm vegan, right? We don't do things like this necessarily so that it can be approved by others. We do it because it's what we believe is ethically right. It's just a very funny world.
Hey everyone, this is Ryan from Aethix Fitness, and this is Season 3 of the Aethix Approach podcast, the podcast where we highlight incredible vegan athletes, nutritionists, and other influential and inspiring vegans in the community and find out what they do to absolutely kill it on a plant-based diet. If you haven't already, please give us a follow anywhere you're listening to this, and feel free to check out the other content I'm producing on aethixfitness.com, including the Aethix coaching services, merch, articles, free training programs, and YouTube videos. Also, feel free to check out my personal fitness Instagram at TofuStrong for more podcast updates and additional content. Creating content like this is a huge passion of mine, and I greatly appreciate any support along those lines. All of my links will be in the description, and thank you so incredibly much for all of the continued love and support. Welcome back to the Aethix Approach podcast. This is Season 3, Episode 9, and today we've got a guest who's been throwing around heavy iron, breaking stereotypes, and spreading the good word of our Lord and Savior, Seitan, for years. Vinnie Crapello. Vinnie competes in the 165-pound weight class as a drug-tested powerlifter and member of the PlantBuilt powerlifting team, with a 460-pound squat, 280-pound bench press, and 529-pound deadlift as his current best competition lifts. But he's not just a powerlifter, he also has a background in CrossFit and wrestling, making him a well-rounded strength athlete that would make Macho Man Randy Savage himself proud. In this episode, we're covering his athletic background, his experience at the 2024 Mr. America Powerlifting competition, and his best lifts and training philosophy. We'll also dive into the conjugate method, the difference between self-programming versus having a coach, and what it's like competing along other top vegan lifters. Of course, we'll get into his vegan journey, his go-to plant-based foods, Boca, Beyond, or Gardein, of course, being the main questions here, and even how the band Earth Crisis and other hardcore music played a role in his switch. Plus, we tackle vegan activism, how plant-based food culture has changed, and why the growth of veganism seems stagnant lately. And because this is the Aethix Approach podcast, of course, we're diving into deeper topics too: hypermasculinity in fitness, PED use on social media, why tough guys are often the nicest, and what's next for Vinnie. It's a packed episode with plenty of real talk and insights, so grab your favorite protein shake, get comfy, and let's jump into it with Vinnie Crapello. All right, what's up, guys? This is Ryan with the Aethix Approach podcast. Today, I'm joined by Vinnie Crapello. Did I get your last name right?
That is how it is pronounced.
Awesome. Vinnie, thanks so much for coming on, dude. Really appreciate it. And if you want to do a quick little elevator pitch for yourself, kind of just like who you are, what you do, just quick little overview, and we'll get into like some specifics in a second. That'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Vinnie Crapello. I am a decades-long vegan. I've been vegan for about 16 years,
Wow.
vegetarian for
Okay.
about 20. Currently, I broadly say strength athlete, but I'm a competitive powerlifter. I used to be a CrossFitter for a long time.
Mhm.
And I own a barbershop in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Vinnie's Barbershop. And I'm also a member of the both the Vegan Strong PlantBuilt team, a team of vegan strength athletes across, powerlifting, obviously, as well as strongman, bodybuilding, and kettlebell sport, as well as a CrossFit team. And I'm also a Switch for Good athlete as well. Switch for Good is an organization that sets out to prove that you don't need dairy to be a solid athlete. So
I never heard of that. Switch for Good. So it's about dairy specifically?
yeah, so they
Huh.
are. So it was. Oh Lord, I hope they don't listen to this because my knowledge of the organization's history isn't as tight as it should be yet. This was a recent change, so or a
Okay,
recent
okay, makes sense.
undertaking, but so there is a person. I'm so sorry, I cannot recall her name. Goes who's at Vegan Olympian on Instagram. She
Hmm.
started this organization, Switch for Good. She's an Olympian. She was an Olympic marathoner. And my understanding is this organization originally set out to be about running specifically, and then
Hmm.
they started to branch into other sports to show that you can be an effective vegan athlete or an effective athlete
Hmm.
specifically relating to their current drive is about ditching dairy specifically. But there's while it's not a 100% vegan organization, my
Uh-huh.
understanding, it is started by a vegan athlete, and vegan athletes are their primary focus of um, people who they ask to be their ambassadors.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so their main drive, like they've compartmentalized to work not on, the broad scope of veganism like the Vegan Strong Plant-Built team, but
Hmm.
hyper specialize on just being anti-dairy for the same reasons though, for animals, for the environment, for the body.
Sure. That's
Yeah,
awesome. Oh, that's good. That's good to hear about.
yeah.
So I'm curious to just to start off here, what got you into athletics and everything from the beginning? So it sounds like you've been like a long-term athlete, right? Like you've always been into something?
So, yes and no. I've long thought that I wanted to be an athlete. I've
Uh-huh.
not always been a decent athlete. Like I never quite had the focus. If you go back, I'm the youngest of three. I've got two older brothers.
Uh-huh.
Um, we all played soccer and hockey growing up, although hockey being an expensive sport and me being the third, like by the time I had got there, the funds for it had kind of run dry, and I think my
Uh-huh.
interest had kind of waned. So I didn't really start playing ice hockey until way later. I didn't start until
High
sophomore,
school?
junior year of high school, but I had
Gotcha.
played soccer all through into the start of high school. I tried to get into wrestling. I wrestled in eighth grade and then
Hmm.
started to in freshman year. And then I was like, I don't like the culture here. And so I think that instance kind of set me away from athletics in high
Sure.
school until I was developed in it. I studied. I was more of a drama nerd in high
Hmm.
school. I had gone to the gym, like I was working out,
Uh-huh.
quote unquote working out. You know how high schoolers they kind of like this was the early 2000s. So
Curl some bicep,
um,
you do some bicep curls,
yeah, like
push-ups.
you have like back and bis, chest and tries, and that was it. I don't know that I ever touched my legs
Yeah.
besides like running and soccer or wrestling practice.
Yep.
And that was it for a long time. And I remember in uh 2013, 2014,
Hmm.
thinking like, I had memberships to various gyms, like I had started to take it a little bit more seriously, but even then the resources on what to find weren't so easy to find even as the internet grew and my understanding of like my ability to research things grew.
Hmm.
I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know how to find a program. So in 2014, I found CrossFit,
Hmm.
and I started at the gym that I still currently train at, even though I don't do CrossFit anymore. Um, uh, which is Novum Fitness here in Philadelphia. Shout out
Okay.
Novum. And having someone tell me what I was supposed to do and give me the why helped me focus so intently on my
Hmm.
fitness that it just like became a specific part of me. Like I had always been vaguely around fitness and athletics. I
Uh-huh.
loved hockey, I loved professional wrestling, I loved amateur wrestling or like folk style and freestyle wrestling.
Uh-huh.
Um, but then being able to actually do my own thing while also still having that guidance allowed me to specialize and find out what I actually liked about fitness. So I know in
Hmm.
CrossFit, you're not actually supposed to specialize. That's the whole function of their fitness model. But I found what my body liked to do, which was over time developing into powerlifting. Like
Hmm.
my body's best movements are the power lifts. I'm great at squatting. I'm great at deadlifting. I'm okay at benching. And then so just a few years ago, I decided to switch it all up and focus exclusively on powerlifting. And it's been a pretty solid focus of my athletics and my sport career.
Yeah. I didn't know that you were only doing powerlifting technically for only a few years. It makes
Uh,
sense. Yeah, I guess a lot of like the CrossFit stuff, like it is general strength development, right? And you kind of found like you were really good with squats, right? So it makes sense to segue into powerlifting.
yeah, so CrossFit and broadly functional fitness, right?
Yeah.
The the idea is you're not supposed to specialize. It's general strength availability for any and all um, circumstance, right?
Uh-huh.
It was designed with the idea of being a life-saving technique, for lack of a better way of putting it. Something that's going to generally develop your body so that it can carry you through the entirety of your life.
Hmm.
Um, and I said, no, I don't. I don't want to be generally fit. I would like to exclusively be okay at three things, and that's it. But yeah, so I only just finished my second powerlifting season.
Okay.
Um, my most recent meet being at Mr. America with the Vegan Strong PlantBuilt team, um, where we took home 31 medals across the four sports we did, I
That's
think.
amazing.
Um, that sounds about right. Yeah, it was Lordy, that was a it was a fun weekend. But yeah, so the reason I even decided that I could get into powerlifting specifically was
Hmm.
because I was a fan of the Vegan Strong Plant Built team. I had watched them ever since I think 2015 they first came
Yeah.
onto my radar. I had backed some of their uh, Kickstarter campaigns. I got my little hoodie, my little swag. Occasionally, I would get a little cookbook from them.
Uh-huh.
And 2 years ago, they had returned after a short hiatus, which I think was pandemic adjacent.
Hmm.
And I went to go see them at the Mr. America in Atlantic City two
Yeah.
years ago. I had known several of them from the internet and was like, I'm going to go meet my friends from the internet in real life. I'm going to watch them compete. I'm going to cheer them up. And so I'm watching powerlifting, I'm watching this sport. And I was like, not only do I enjoy watching this, but I can do this. This is a sport that
Hmm.
I know I can jump into. I just want to focus and my goal is to join this team now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So literally, I the next day after that Mr. America in October of 2022,
Hmm.
I switched up my programming, stopped doing CrossFit entirely, bought a powerlifting program, and um, never looked back. I competed alongside the Plant Built team the
Hmm.
next Mr. America the following year, and then early this year, I was recruited onto the team.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
So
That's so
yeah, it
cool.
was a lot of fun.
Um, I was there, oh man, I think it was last year. I was like shooting some photos and videos and stuff, and I saw you compete along with like oh man, like Ryan Stills and Nick
Yeah,
Squires and the whole like powerlifting team, Katya. I actually recently had Katya and Daniel Austin on the podcast, and you guys are all awesome. Like I really do love everyone
thank
that I've
you.
met from yeah, everyone that I've met
Thank
from PlantBuilt, like Giacomo and Danny, like they're such great people. It's just so nice. I feel like the whole vegan community is just they're just great people for the most part. Especially if they're in it for, what they, should be the animals, right? Like sometimes I
right.
feel like there's a little bit of like a sub niche of quote unquote vegans, plant-based people, whatever. But
Uh,
if you're vegan for the
the
animals, I feel like yeah,
TikTok
go ahead.
vegans. Oh no, well, yeah,
Oh,
it's just like
yeah.
it's those who conflate the just like having a diet, having a plant-based diet with veganism, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
Oh my
Like
God. Those
vein
are the
starts
ones that
popping out of my forehead.
those are the ones that end up quitting veganism after a year, saying that it ruined their health.
They're like, oh, I died after 6 weeks. All
Yeah.
I was eating was a handful of spinach a day.
Yup. And then they go
Vegans
viral
are
on
dying.
TikTok and then yeah, makes veganism look terrible or plant-based diets, whatever. But oh, that's a whole other tangent. That's
Yeah.
the worst.
Oh, that's a tangent I'll go on any day of the week. I love that one.
Yeah.
You give me a
Uh
soapbox, I'll stand on it, but I'm also only 5'5", so I need to be able to see over everybody.
speaking of that, so tying it back into veganism, what is your or not veganism, powerlifting?
Oh,
What's your weight class that you compete in?
I so in actual federations, I'm a 75 kilo
Okay,
weightlifter, weightlifter, as if I can snatch. Uh, which means I'm like 165,
sure.
164.7 or
Yeah.
something like that. So yeah,
Huh. I guess let's keep talking about powerlifting since we're on that subject. So you've been competing for about 2, 3 years now. You said training powerlifting for like 3 years, competing for
yeah,
a couple. Let's talk about your numbers and such. So have
sure.
they? You've been running. I know you said you started with like a program you bought online.
Yeah, so the
Um,
first program I
yeah.
trained was the Hard Work Pays Off Strong, which
Okay.
is developed by Rob Kearney. If you're familiar with him, he's at
That's
World's
familiar.
Strongest Gay on Instagram.
Oh yeah, sure,
Uh,
sure.
so he's with HWPO. That's Matt Fraser, 5-time fittest on earth with CrossFit, I believe.
Mhm.
So it's his brand that he started programming. I was doing their CrossFit programming for about a year and a half before that, and then was like, ah, man, that was just killing me. Like there was a point where I just realized that my recovery with CrossFit just was not happening. So I was actually
Huh.
super thankful for this like serendipitous moment. And then knowing that within this app that I already had was their like powerlifting program. I
Yeah.
switched to that and I did that for woof. How long was I doing that? I was doing that for about a year. The
Hmm.
HWPO is strong. Then I read a good amount of um, conjugate and West Side Barbell Method books.
Yeah.
Um, so I did my own little bastard version of that my until maybe May or June of this year,
Hmm.
probably May. And then I switched to having Ryan, our powerlifting captain,
Right.
with the Vegan Strong Plant Built team. I had him coach me and program for me now. So he's been doing
Gotcha.
that ever since. So it's been a great steady climb ever since my first meet. I've now done 6 meets in my first 2 years. I've already
Wow.
got
That's a lot.
one. Yeah, it's so funny talking to Daniel Austin. He was always just like, "Man, you're just gonna kill yourself doing that." And I'm like, "I'm not old yet. I'm not gonna let it to get me down yet. I have to let it I have to let it simmer and then maybe I'll calm down after my third year. We'll see."
You're probably still
So
making consistent progress too, right? Because you've
yeah,
only been
yeah, it's
powerlifting for a few years.
yeah, it's not been my total has gone up every meet,
That's amazing.
which is sick. Even with some like my deadlift, I want to say my deadlift maxed out earlier this year, and then it
Mm-hmm.
dropped down my last 2 meets, but I've progressed on my bench and squat. So,
Hmm.
you know, my total's
Give and a take.
pretty, yeah, I'm happy for my total to consistently rise. So,
Yeah. What's your experience with having like a cookie cutter powerlifting program versus being coached by Ryan?
so even though I don't know that it was fair to consider it cookie cutter necessarily because it was
Okay.
still percentage based and it was still pretty well varied. Uh,
Okay.
I I will say having Ryan be able to immediate like the value I find in a direct coach is having the immediate question and response of sending him footage of me doing a movement that I'm not feeling so hot on, or
Uh-huh.
maybe I am feeling like, oh man, this this tempo was excellent. And he's like, well, it would be excellent if you went slow enough. And I'm like, but what do you mean? He said, well, you're doing, 3 counts down. It's supposed to be 5 counts down. I'm like,
Yeah.
it was five in my head. And he's like, well, next week you're gonna have to do 5 out loud. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
oh no. Yeah, so I'd say that's the major benefit that I gleaned from coaching is just like having someone to actually hold me accountable besides myself.
Right. That makes
So,
sense. Yeah, I've never really taken powerlifting too seriously. I just like to try to lift heavy. And honestly, I'm not genetically blessed with it at all, but I love trying to lift heavy. My only time that I've had a coach a couple times, and those were the times when I made way more progress. And it's just
mm,
crazy having somebody hold you accountable and just kind of see from an objective third party point of view what you're doing and be able to correct things and program on the fly and things. It really, really does help from my experience.
it really does. And I think on top of that, I'm used to being on uh percentage based numbers.
Uh-huh.
And that was great. My first program was very much percentage based. And then when I was developing my own little program, it was somewhat RPE based, but not without any real understanding of it. And then Ryan exclusively does based on RPE and then reps. And
Right. He used to work
he'll,
with reactive training systems, right?
yeah, I don't entirely know his history. You might know better than I do. But he has a lot of experience and he's been
Yeah.
around the block a long time. I think he was with Reactive. I know he was
Okay.
also with Westside.
Oh,
Um,
wow. I
yeah.
had no idea about that.
So I don't know, what era of Westside, but at the very
Sure.
least, I know how much he uh banks on proper use of the RPE scale.
Uh-huh.
And I'm learning a ton from that, especially as I've never really properly used it before. And
Uh-huh.
so, having his eyes on something like that has really helped me kind of push to limits in a way that uh, it it doesn't feel unsafe and it doesn't feel safe at the same time. Like I'm not, and I don't
Okay.
mean I don't mean it doesn't feel safe in like, oh, I'm gonna
It
die.
feels,
It
yeah.
I feel like I'm pushing myself, in a
Yeah,
way
it feels
that
heavy.
it feels heavy, right? Like let's say he has me at volume sets, like sets of 6 to 8 at an RPE 8 or 9.
Mhm.
Like I don't feel like uh I'm I don't feel like I'm gonna die under the weight, but I'm not exactly having a good time, you know,
Yeah.
which is where the growth is happening, I think. So
RPE 9 is still a very, very, very hard lift, right?
yes, yeah. So RPE 9 should be you have maybe another rep in the tank, maybe.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna be a little bit of a grind. RPE 10 is like you're gonna bleed out of every orifice.
Yeah, it's like physically
So
hurting.
yeah,
So you said you kind of you dabbled with conjugate, right? What was your
yeah.
impression of the conjugate program?
So the conjugate method's kind of funny, at least based on my understanding. This is why I say that I kind of had a bastardization of it. Um, is I like the idea of a maximal effort attempt,
Hmm.
whether it's 1, 3, or 5 reps. Um, I think that's fun. I like the dynamic aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think doing that set me up for success with this current RPE based programming because that
Hmm.
kind of got me comfortable with pushing myself to a limit and letting me get to a point of okay, I don't have any more velocity, I don't have any more ability. I have to cut it here or
Yeah.
else I'm going to get hurt, you know?
Right, right,
So I
right.
think that's I think that's really where the benefit is. And also training variations is just so fun. Like,
That is fun. Yeah.
yeah, conjugate is just so hard on use variations, use chains, use weight
Right.
releasers, use bands. Load your bands from the bottom, load your bands from the top. Do something that is more future method, do something that is going to
Weak
be
points.
more progressive loading, whatever. Like
Yeah.
if like throw out your comp back squat and throw in things like SSB front
Yeah.
squats.
Sure.
And I just really genuinely love a good variation on a movement that helps me feel like my body is getting what it needs and also is just moving differently for
Uh-huh.
once,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know, feel free to add on to this or clarify. But from my understanding, conjugate is very much based on like 3 or 4 week waves where like you program in an exercise. You have, let's say, a lot of accommodating resistance and stuff. So like bands, chains, whatever. Usually have a max effort day for lower and upper, and then a dynamic effort day for lower and upper. So I think usually it's like a 4 day program. And the dynamic day is very much based on like power, being explosive, lots of sets, few reps. And the max effort day is obviously just like heavy, heavy work. And then you still program in a lot of accessories and such. Right? Would you say that's pretty
Yes.
accurate?
So that's a pretty solid assessment. Yeah, and they really really harp on the necessity of accessories being, as far as I'm concerned, accessories, the way that they were talking about them in a lot of what I was reading,
Hmm.
accessories should almost always be till failure or close to it. Like
Okay.
each set should be something that's going to be close to a burnout. So you're getting like uh, much more of hypertrophic work there
Hmm.
and allowing that to be where you're fine tuning while, like you were saying, on your maximal effort days, like letting that build for power, and on your dynamic effort days, letting that build for velocity.
Yeah.
And that's why they keep them at typically lower rep, but like a ton of sets, is because
Right.
those dynamic effort days are supposed to be just like it's supposed to be pure explosion,
Yeah,
like
sure.
throwing the weight.
And I know a lot of times it's like bands and such. I know a lot of people also switch it for like a quote unquote volume day where it's more like in, I guess, more goal of hypertrophy or whatever. And it's just like maybe 5 sets of 8 to 10. Maybe you could do an RPE based approach, but like you're pushing
Yeah.
closer to failure, something like
Yes.
that. So I guess you can kind of tailor it a lot of different ways, but that's I feel like that's a pretty decent overview for anybody who
Yeah.
doesn't fully understand it, right?
Yeah, the one thing I never quite was able to grasp was how to properly periodize under that program. Like even doing it as
Mhm.
a 4 week thing, I was like, all right, so if I'm doing variations every day, when do I do this? Which, exposes my ignorance on uh how much I was absorbing as I was reading was okay, so how do I go up in weight in this one movement? Like when do I
Yeah.
retest this? Because if next week I'm switching up my variations, when am I going to come back to this? You know?
Yeah. Would you
So
program for like 3 week waves or something where you keep in one exercise and try to progress on it each week and then swap?
no, it was so pretty much my main lifts, the way I was doing it, were always going to change out, but I would keep my accessories the same for about
Uh-huh.
3 weeks.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
find
that
conjugate
worked.
really interesting. Yeah, I find the idea behind it really interesting, and it's like the variations are really fun. But honestly, I never really played around with it too much. But I know a lot of people who swear by it, so I was curious about your experience.
Yeah, I think if I were to go back to programming for myself, I would probably do the same thing again.
Okay.
But fine tune it a little bit more to include some actual periodization.
Hmm.
Uh, I when I was doing it, I was just not really paying attention. It was pretty much everything was till failure at some point. I was
Yeah,
like,
that's the
fuck it,
best.
I'm just gonna burn out every set. And honestly, it worked for me during that time. And I
Yeah.
think me switching it up to having a coach was the right time for me to do it,
Yeah,
you
that
know?
makes sense. A lot of us lifters, I feel like a lot of us love just pushing shit really hard, like
Yeah.
harder than we probably should. Like the serious ones, at least, we're all kind of masochists. So I feel like my intention, if I'm left to my own devices, I'm gonna want to try to push everything to failure, like just by nature.
Yes. Yes, right. That's like it's. I've only got my body for so long. I might as well just see what it can do. I think there's a
Yeah.
Socrates quote about that, but I'm not going to look it up.
We'll imagine it. We'll pretend we know it.
Yeah, listeners, just imagine that Socrates said something super intelligent about using your body or something like that. I don't know. I don't care.
I'll overlay it here. I probably won't actually, but we'll just pretend.
It's just an AI voice, that TikTok AI voice pops in and is like, as Socrates said.
Yeah. Speaking of which, that TikTok voice cracks me up. Whenever I used to try to write vegan or something, it would say vegan.
Oh God,
Yeah.
my favorite
AI is
pronunciation of the
wild.
word. I'm over
Um,
it.
so what's your experience been working with the PlantBuilt team? Like I know you said you kind of like you followed them before and everything. How's it been competing with them and working with them?
Yeah, so being on the inside is it, there's like a few tiers of it, right? There's the full team, and that's very professional. We're all like super supportive. We've got our one group chat, whatever. Group chat,
Group
that's the
chat?
entire our group chat, where it's the whole team, everyone that is, I guess, pretty much currently invited into the chat, which is some people who weren't even at Mr. America this past year.
Uh-huh.
They're team members from years past, so it's super supportive. Everyone talking about their like successes, and then there's the powerlifting um, group chat, which is separate, where we are, as best as I can put it, a bunch of child gorillas. We're uh, we're just a bunch of idiots, and it's the funniest thing of like when Daniel refers to himself as the vegan meathead. Uh, he is, funnily enough, probably the least um stereotypical meathead about it in our entire group chat. We're all just, I swear to God, we're all just apes. It is, we're, I don't even know how to describe the attitude that we all have, but then getting us all together in person in Atlantic City, you know, our little sport teams all break off and hang out the entire weekend together, kind of on our
Uh-huh.
own. There's a little bleed over between the strongmen and the powerlifting teams because I'd say those are
Very
um,
strength oriented.
we're similar ilk, I would say.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and it's literally like we're all just going from restaurant to restaurant, eating our way through these poor people's entire inventory, hooting and hollering like we're I don't know, like we're at a sporting event constantly. Just the way that we talk about things, the way that we go about things. It's so jovial. It's so fun. The best way I can describe being with these people, being with this team for the 5-ish days in Atlantic City was like sleepaway summer camp.
I
Uh,
love that. That's
it's
amazing.
it's yeah, it's sleepaway summer camp if we were all also idiots.
Just like devolving.
just just all of us just beating our chests, throwing crap at each other. Uh, it's just so fun. Yeah. And such a supportive community. I think the way that I put it, I might have even put this on my Instagram when I did my little meet recap or weekend recap where I said this was the community that I think I've been looking
Yeah,
for lack of a better way of putting it.
for sure. That makes sense. You bring together a lot of like people who are already very niche in terms of veganism, like what, like 1.5 or 2% of the population max. And then
Right.
you combined, being very competitive and also another niche sport, powerlifting, strongman, whatever. Like how many percentage of the population even do that? You have like a
Yeah.
0.001% of the whole population right there. Like there's going to be a lot of overlap, right?
Yeah. 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 A lot of times it seemed like our Venn diagrams were just whole ass circles. So,
Yeah.
you know, it was
It,
it was
it
very cool.
it is funny. Like I feel like a lot of I'm not exactly sure what the niche is here. I think it might just be like the lifting aspect of like the meathead aspect, like the bro
Yeah.
aspect. A lot of us are very sarcastic and like kind of just like you said, kind of just like dumb and just like beating our chests and like oh, it's almost like a sporting event in general when we all get together. It's like
Yeah.
I'm not
There's
sure
something to
what
be
it is,
said
but
about the like inherent machismo of it, but like there's something almost intentionally a parody of machismo when I'm with these people, right? Like none of it is authentic. Uh, it's intentionally unauthentic, um, like
sarcasm.
macho behavior. We're all just like everyone that I know from the vegan strong team, we're all just like we're all sensitive. We're all at times like fairly open with our emotions and our feelings. I don't
Yeah.
know any one of them to hide back from being like super vulnerable with
Uh-huh.
with uh how things make them feel.
Hmm.
And yet we're all just like we come in there and we're like, oh, want to see me headbutt this piece of wood? It's such a weird dichotomy because I we're it's just strength sports are just such a macho arena and we're all just like, hi, I'm vegan.
That is kind of funny.
Especially
Do you
me. I'm
feel like
like,
there's
what are you saying?
sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I was gonna say especially me because like I'm a lightweight power lifter, so like I'm short. I'm literally 5'5".
Uh,
I weigh 172 in my training season
uh-huh.
and weigh in at 165 or 75 kilos for competition. So like,
Yeah.
I'm not exactly a large person.
Mhm.
Uh and it's just a very funny world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that in terms of us all being vegan,
Mm,
there's something in our personalities or traits that comes out to kind of offset the whole meatheadness of it? You kind of touched on it, but like what do you think? Like a lot of us are kind of these we make ourselves these outcasts by this moral decision that we make, right? I think we're all a little bit tough in the aspect that we are able to be resilient against societal and cultural norms and what people want to place on us, right? So it makes us a little tougher in a lot of ways, but I think a lot of us are also kind of like we're open to our emotions and such.
mm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it kind of there's a lot to it where we have this empathetic ethics system, right?
Mhm.
And that isn't to say that every vegan I've ever met is a good or sensitive person. Like going back to something you said earlier, I've
Yeah.
met shitty vegans. I think at one point I was a shitty enough person and I've tried really hard to work on not being so. And uh I think that is kind of the point of the ethics system that we choose, right? I remember Herbivore Clothing Company, RIP, out of
Uh-huh.
Portland,
Sure.
used to have a shirt that
I
said
tried to go
vegan.
there.
Oh, mine,
I tried to go there, then they closed like 3 months before I tried to go.
I missed them. I
Yeah.
so sad. But they had a shirt or a tote that said vegan means I'm trying to suck less, right? There's there's no there's no black and white to this besides the diet thing where we're all just
Uh,
like, no, the base level of being a vegan means you follow a strict plant-based diet, right?
mhm,
But veganism does mean that you're a more uh, introspective person, probably.
mhm.
I can't say that that's the rule, but
It makes sense.
from from what I've seen, that does seem to run fairly consistent.
Mhm.
And um, yeah, I think uh, it plays in. Here comes Lucky. Hi, little girl.
Hey,
What's up, sweetie?
Lucky.
She's a sweet girl. Hi,
She's
baby.
the lap girl,
Yeah,
lap cat girl.
she wants to come hang out while I talk.
I love
Okay,
black cats so much.
you're just gonna be there. Just gonna rub your tail on my face. Okay, great. So I think there is something to be said about uh, the outcast nature of veganism, but it it's not intentionally antisocial. It's just the way that society paints it, right?
Yeah,
But
sure.
even then, right, we don't do things like this necessarily so that it can be approved by others. We do it because it's what we believe is ethically right. Um, I hope that
That
answered
definitely
it
makes sense.
because I lost the plot of the original question. And
Lucky came in and
she
stole
was
your thunder.
she was like, "Oh, hey, I'm gonna get into your face. I'm also gonna drool on you. So everything that you thought you were going to say is now gone.
Oh, I love cats so much. I wish I had a cat, but maybe in the near future I'll rescue
Maybe in
one.
the future. Yeah, right. Lucky I
Um,
found on the street.
oh, okay. And you live in Philly, so there's a lot of
There's a lot of
cats,
street
stray
cats.
cats.
A lot of
Yeah.
stray cats here.
I would love to circle back. We haven't really touched on it yet. What got you into veganism in the first place? You said you've been vegan for like 16 years, right?
So yeah, so I went vegan um about 16 years ago.
Hmm.
Uh it was always an ethical decision. It was always animal rights. I had been quote unquote vegetarian for some time before that, about 5 years before I went vegan. The
Hmm.
first iteration of that was like pescatarianism, but I was one of those many people who was like, I'm still a vegetarian,
Uh-huh.
even though fish are an animal. And that was probably about 2 years of being a pescatarian and
Hmm.
three of being a pretty staunch vegetarian. Like I wasn't eating eggs. I was having oh, sorry, Lucky. Oh, goodbye. I was having, whey protein. I remember in my first year of college,
Uh-huh.
uh, in my post workouts, and I wasn't like, checking ingredients on boxes.
Yeah,
And
sure.
then it was just from there, it was just kind of like a slow removal. I think I stopped buying whey protein. I was eating much more seitan. I was eating much more tofu. We started to see the rise of availability in packaged fake meats and stuff like that, and
Uh-huh.
vegan products.
This
And
was
so
like
I was
around
like,
15-ish years ago, give
yeah,
or
this
take.
is yeah, probably about then. Yeah,
Okay.
2009 was when I went vegan on thing of it. So it's like almost 16 years.
Okay.
Um and yeah, so like, I lived on Boca patties and Morningstar
I used to
Farms
love
things.
those.
They taste like trash now, but there's nostalgia to them, so I'm not going to knock them really too hard. But the Boca chicken patties are still, you can buy them on sale. Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. So
They used to
so
have
cheap.
them. They used to be like 90 calories and like 17 grams of protein. I think the macros aren't as
Yeah,
good, but I used to eat them all the time back then. And I was the
yeah.
weirdo who was like, I think these things are delicious.
Yeah, I think they used to have egg in them or something like that, and then they just removed the egg and found a new way to bind them, but they didn't replace the protein with like wheat gluten or anything. But it's
Oh.
still pretty delicious, and I'll eat an entire package at a time. So,
I know they had
um,
one that was vegetarian that had egg, and another one that I know for a fact was vegan, and it was like 90 calories and like 17 grams of protein. And I
whoa.
ate like three of them on like a sandwich, just like triple pattied up.
Oh, that reminds me of the flagship Beyond product, which was Beyond Chicken Strips, which were like 21 grams of protein per serving, and they were amazing. You'd buy them by the bag,
Hmm.
or they weren't in bags yet. Uh, they were they in bags or were they in a tray? There were two iterations of these, one in a
Uh-huh.
bag, one in a tray. Either way, when they started to focus on sausages and burgers, they cut the chicken strip
Hmm.
product line completely, and it was the most macro friendly vegan product I've ever eaten in my life. They discontinued
Really?
these in 2019, and I still write them emails about it because I'm like, how dare you get rid of this perfect product? And now your stock is failing. So
Oh, that's
Bring
sad.
it
It's
back.
true. It's true.
Yeah.
I do have good news though. I was actually at you're probably familiar with Grocery Outlet, right? Being from
Yes, of
Philly.
course.
Okay,
Oh,
all
of
right.
course I am.
That's like the vegan haven for cheap vegan options.
I
Anyways,
didn't
I
realize that's
saw
true across the board. That's so funny.
they don't have them here in New York City, but I go back to my parents' house all the time, which is in like Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and
Yep.
whenever I'm back there, I bring a haul of cheap
Yeah.
vegan goodies back. But I saw they had two different types of Beyond chicken tenders.
Hmm.
So maybe they're coming back. I don't know if it's the
I
same
hope so.
formula.
Right.
Yeah,
The grocery outlet by me regularly has Gardein chicken tenders,
I
which are
love
not
those.
like the most macro friendly, but they are delicious. The 7 grain ones.
And they have the huge
And
bags on, right?
they have the big family size bags, and I will buy probably 2 or 3 of those bags, and they're maybe $7 for
Yeah,
I think like 7 or 8 servings per bag, something like
yeah.
that. Oh God, it's amazing. Grocery outlet, y'all. If you're in the Philadelphia area, check out grocery outlet for all of your vegan or specialty food needs because
It's the best.
nobody ever buys them. So apparently they all just end up at grocery outlets, which is where I thrive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the vegan hack. I love that place. Anyways, we were talking about your vegan history here, right?
All right. All right. So it was always ethical. When I first went vegetarian, it was I had known what veganism was. This is 2003 or 4. I had heard about veganism. I knew the band Earth Crisis,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
was a vegan straight edge band from the 90s all the way through till today.
Mhm.
If you're unfamiliar with Earth Crisis, might I recommend you listen to Firestorm or Gamora Season Ends,
That's
or
great.
All Out War
Good
in
good
its
gym music
entirety.
too.
Yeah, good gym music, excellent. So I knew about veganism, but I was just like, I don't understand this. But there was a girl I liked, and so uh, I went vegetarian for Lent because she was Catholic, and I was raised
Hmm.
Catholic, so I was already accustomed to giving something up for Lent. I said, I'm gonna get her to like me, and I'm gonna go vegetarian. And then, sure enough, I just never stopped being vegetarian or
Hmm.
pescatarian after Lent. And I think that year I attended my first or second work tour, and I stopped by the PETA tent and got a
Hmm.
bunch of stuff from PETA, like a vegan starter kit. And I was like, oh, this is what this is. And um, I remember stickering up my bedroom door with not a nugget and you know, sheep wool stickers and stuff, even
Hmm.
though I think at that time I might have still been eating um, fish or
Uh-huh.
like I remember a friend of mine conning me into eating a chicken sandwich probably around that time. Like
Hmm.
those little setbacks of my ethics and my convictions weren't quite
Yeah.
as strong or developed
And they
at that
happen.
time, and
That's
they
like I'm glad
happen.
you mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think it's an important thing. A lot of people think that I either went vegan overnight or or what have you, or like that, you know, I might be in this so long now that I don't have cravings, I don't miss anything, but that
Yeah,
doesn't mean
sure.
that there wasn't a time, like especially in those
100%.
early days where I didn't have the tools, I didn't have
Hmm.
the knowledge, I didn't have the understanding that I do now. And I mean, sure enough, even as a like suburban kid, I didn't have the privilege that I do now of having my own income, having my own ability to choose where I shop and what I shop for.
Yeah.
Um, and so, uh, I just didn't know. And it kind of goes back to vegan means I'm trying to suck less, and I'm happy and thankful for those times where I was having those wavering moments in my ethics and still able to get back into them, right? And
Hmm.
then further solidify them as time went on. So then by the time, May 2nd, 2009 came around, which was the day that I decided that I was going to be vegan, May 3rd, not May 2nd, sorry. Um, I was, I had already done up to that point several. accidental months and weeks of being vegan that then had little breaks in them where I didn't even realize that I was still vegan. I would look back on it in retrospect and be like, oh
Hmm.
shit, I was vegan for this time. Oh, I can
Hmm.
do this. Oh, I'm going to do this, you know, and that's kind
Yeah.
of how it
Yeah.
went.
Yeah.
And that's why I always encourage people to start with a meatless Monday, start with a meatless meal, an intentionally vegan meal, right? Not even just like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm going out for vegan food. Like, say, I'm doing this for this reason. Or,
Hmm.
I'll never forget, I went to this thing earlier this year that was organized by Revolution Philadelphia, which is a local animal rights organization that does wonderful work in the Philadelphia area for rescues. They protested the carriage horses in Philadelphia and got them taken from the Independence Hall
That's
area.
great. Fuck
Uh,
those horse
right?
carriages in a city.
They're currently working on foie gras protests in Philadelphia. Earlier
Good.
this year, they had a thing that they called the Weekend for the Animals. I think it was their second time doing it with Jake Conroy, formerly of the Shack Seven.
Uh-huh.
If you're unfamiliar with who that is, look up the documentary The Animal People, and it'll give you all of the information on Jake and his legal battles from the early 2000s. But he was giving a effectively an activist seminar, like how to become or how to be an effective activist. And he had mentioned how uh, animal rights uh, as a movement is so exclusionary
Hmm.
in in its design because we're so staunch in saying if you're not vegan you're not one of us, you can't say this, or
Hmm.
you can't support these same ideas. And he was like, why don't we allow more people into our circles, right? We can then start to tell them about veganism, but let them lend their voice. If they want to talk about foie gras, if they want to talk about carriage horses, if they want to talk about fur sales down at, Neiman Marcus, uh, then let them, because another voice is another voice.
Sure.
And their ability to then develop their ethics in the same way that, say, I was a bit
Hmm.
able to develop my ethics over time with an ebb and a flow is going
Hmm.
to make it more solidified. So I think over time I eventually just like I had all of the pieces put together. I found what my pathway was to be able to fully envelop these ethics and make them my own. You know, starting with, as we all know, when you go vegan, the first thing is to quote unquote actually go vegan, which is to adhere to that strict plant-based diet. And then it
Hmm.
was eventually I got rid of any clothing I had that had any plant-based animal-based materials in it, right? I got rid of my wool. I got rid of anything that was leathery. Although I don't
Hmm.
think I ever had leather because leather always skeeved me out anyway. But I wouldn't be surprised if this happened around the same time. I remember even when I first went vegan for the first few months, honey was still a thing that I consumed because I was
Uh-huh.
like, well, it's just like I remember distinctly saying, well, fuck a bee. What is a bee, right? And
Yeah.
then I learned about honey. And also, I'll never forget my buddy Brandon saying, if you're gonna do this thing, do this thing. He
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
much he
Sure.
just called me out, right?
Uh-huh.
He's like, it's it's all or nothing,
Honey's such an
and
easy one to swap out too.
such an easy one to swap out, right? It's for me, it was I wasn't even using honey in anything. It was products
Yeah.
that I would buy that contained honey.
Right.
Like,
Like
oh
Kind bars or something, right? Like they had like
yeah,
honey in them a lot
Lit
or granola bars of some sort.
literally it was granola bars and like an occasional wrap or bread,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that was it.
They really do love to sneak honey and things like that. Like I know Trader Joe's sneaks it into a bunch of their wraps and
Yeah.
stuff, and it's like, dude, why? You could put agave nectar in there. It's probably the same
You
price.
straight up
Like,
don't even have to sweeten your wraps. I don't understand what the
exactly.
additional carbohydrate is there. Is it just not holding together? I'm not a food scientist, no, nor am I a baker of wraps, but
Yeah, I
it
don't know.
seems like there's an extra ingredient here for the sake of having an extra ingredient. Like maybe it
Yeah.
stretches the dough. I don't know.
I feel like it's just a sweetener, but I don't know. I'm with you. I have no
Right,
idea. I'm just like, why do you guys put that in there? There's no reason.
right. Ugh, there's hair floating all around me. One monkey jumped on me.
That's that's oh, it's not from being a barber, it's your cat.
No, yeah, no. Surprisingly, this is not something I brought home from work. This is when Lucky crawled on me, there was just tufts of hair that she just left.
So how has veganism changed from your point of view? For someone who's been vegan for 16 years, how was it?
Oof.
You kind of touched on it a little bit, but how is it like then versus now?
Okay, I'm going to start on consumer mode, which is to say products, right? The availability of products, and I'll even say information on how to go vegan is it so much more than I had when I was coming up, even as a vegetarian, then even as a
Yeah.
vegan, right? I went vegan 2009, which is the year I believe that Twitter started to give people
Mhm.
context of what was going on in the world. So the internet wasn't new. It wasn't, Wikipedia was all the rage. Google was available. YouTube was awesome. Vine existed. Like
Mhm.
these are things that
Vine.
I
Oh my God.
yeah yeah yeah
Oh.
there were resources though, right? um and even then it wasn't a super popular idea. I remember joining the animal rights coalition of my university, of
Mhm.
my actual the school that I was going to at that time. I was the only vegan that was going to these meetings, and so I stopped. I was like, I don't understand what we're supposed to do. Me now, would I love to envelop that world and be a part of it and help guide them with more ethical choices? Yes. But
Mhm.
I didn't have those tools then. I had
Yeah.
a few books published by PETA. I
Mhm.
had some cookbooks. I had the Veganomicon. I had Issa Chandra Moskowitz out the wazoo. If you've never read her cookbooks, do yourself a favor. She's the goat. Um, but like that's kind of all that existed. There was a couple vegan restaurants that you could find. A lot of them all smelled the same. If you've never smelt a vegan or vegetarian restaurant before from that era, I don't know how to describe it to you, but they all had the same scent. And it's not one that exists much anymore when you go into vegan restaurants. And then when you find one,
Interesting.
if you're ever with someone who's like what I call like an old world or before times vegan, they'll know.
Uh-huh.
There's just a smell. I think the smell is actually just like roasted vegetables. I think that's what it
Uh-huh.
is. Maybe no vegetarian restaurants operated with an actual hood, like a kitchen hood.
Uh-huh.
But it's a smell that's just so specific. But that said, right, like the availability and of information and what you can eat is so widespread now.
Yeah,
And
sure.
um, but on top of that, now you have the unfortunate side, which is as veganism has grown, and then there was like this massive explosion a few years ago, right? Like any
Hmm.
explosion, it has to dissipate at some point. And now we're starting
Yeah.
to see the other side of that mountain, which is to say vegan restaurants are closing. We're starting to
Yeah, sure.
see the celebrity interest in veganism wane,
Uh-huh.
where now that becomes like this clout chase where someone who was vegan for a year, 2 years, 1 month, they're like, I have to stop being vegan. Here's why. And then it becomes this thing that they have to publicize because now
And they try to find a
veganism,
reason for it.
they try to
And
find
they
a
don't,
reason,
a lot
right?
of times they don't have a good one, but they're just like, oh, my health went to shit. And it's like,
Right,
did it though? Like Miley Cyrus was like saying she didn't get her omega threes. And it's
right,
like, I'm sorry, that's not the reason. Like you just want to find an excuse to just come out and say you're not vegan anymore. Like
right.
it's just not cool anymore,
It's
apparently to her.
interestingly
So
enough, it's the same thing. I don't know if you're seeing this in New York, but a lot of formerly vegan
they're
restaurants are
closing.
now starting to serve meat. If they're not
Oh,
closing,
sure.
they're starting to become non-vegan. They're straight up non-vegetarian restaurants.
Yeah.
It's an astonishing change where I'm wondering what this what this change comes from. Now on the business side, I'm sure it's like, oh, we're trying to survive. And I'm like, okay, well, why are we diluting an actual um, form of ethics, right? You can
Yeah.
say you're a plant-based restaurant. You could still say you're a plant-forward restaurant or whatever and serve whatever it is you want. So now to answer the question, what I'm seeing as we move along is now this dilution of what veganism is,
Mm.
as we also just see language change, which is a very unfortunate thing, right? And this is one of those downsides of the internet is the as we flourish in this widespread information, we also see language change with an unforeseen rapidity.
Mm.
And that changes, well, it changes a lot more than just the language, right? It changes what the purpose of certain terms is,
Yeah.
right? You're not going to look at existentialism, absurdism, and stoicism and say that, oh, we can change what those mean, but people feel that they can change what veganism means. But veganism is a philosophy. It's a
Mm.
code of ethics, and that's much more ironclad than people tend to give it credit for. So I think what we're seeing as time goes on is now this like um, division of
Mm.
what veganism is versus isn't, and honestly, a lot of that has to come down to marketing.
Yeah, sure. You kind of touched on this a little bit. You kind of said that, yeah, like veganism kind of blew up a little bit. I don't know. From my experience, I think it was like kind of like 2018, 2019-ish.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Um,
where I'd probably pin it.
yeah, but like you kind of touched on this saying like, yeah, it blew up and like things that kind of get more popular really quickly, they're probably going to pull back. Do you think there's any specific reasons for why it's kind of like losing its like cool factor or like people are less interested in like animal ethics or whatever recently?
There's a multi-layer reason. So the first one I would probably say is just uh it's things like TikTok. I can't point to TikTok specifically for this, right? But
Sure.
things like TikTok have allowed for hyper fast spread of information, right? And to that effect, hyper fast spread of misinformation.
Mm.
So, without even addressing on the political implications of that, we can see how industries can use this spread of information to then further things like marketing campaigns. So,
Yeah.
when we think of what has started to damage uh, veganism, a lot of it comes down to just marketing campaigns from whole industries, right? The dairy industry and animal agriculture have a large hand in what people see with relation to um, animal rights and veganism. I still see people quoting that website, PETA Kills Animals, which is owned by an animal agriculture lobby,
Wow, I didn't
and
know
no
that.
one, right, and no one ever talks about how the concept that quote unquote PETA kills animals is because PETA has an overflow system
Mm.
from no kill shelters. And so what they're doing is they are euthanizing overflow from no kill shelters because we still have this overbreeding problem of pets in or companion animals in the United States. Where so what we're seeing is PETA just has they're doing the dirty work for
Yeah,
no kill
sure.
shelters so they can still stay labeled as no kill shelters, right? And I'm sure there are some darker sides to that. I can't say that PETA is 100% a good organization, but I don't know. I don't actually know that they're not, you
Yeah,
know? So things like that are big into at least like this pull away, but then also I think of a lot of cultural things as pendulum swings, right? So
sure.
the
Hmm.
unfortunate thing is so many people hung on to veganism as this growing trend that
Hmm.
once that pendulum swings away, we see it with other things, right? We see it with cigarette smoking, right? Cigarette smoking is back up because
Yeah,
our our like millennials largely got rid of it, and so the next generation saw that there
so
was
true.
right? That it's just how it works. It works in
How
fashion, it
about
works in
trends in
music.
fitness? It's
right?
like
Trends in
keto gets
fitness,
really popular, intermittent fasting, things like
right?
that, certain training methodologies.
Honestly, yeah. Even right, we're seeing with fitness right now, what's notably big, right? Functional fitness has kind of fallen away. You're seeing the CrossFit crowd to be largely older, right? They're like mid 30s and up. What we're seeing now in gyms largely is younger, right? It's you're seeing people get into bodybuilding who are between the ages of like 16 and 24. And so much so now, like we're kind of eking into a weird territory there where steroid use is also up in
Oh yeah.
that in that demographic in a way that we've never quite seen before. I think someone
Yeah.
could probably
hmm
correct me on that, but it's an interesting thing to see, and a lot of this is further dictated by what we're seeing on social media.
Yeah, and then
Uh,
you have people like Sam Sulek being glorified.
right.
And then how about I don't really follow a ton of YouTube fitness for like I guess, younger kids and stuff, but like Alex Eubank I know is pretty popular. He
Mm,
recently said he's going on TRT. He's like probably 23, 24, but he
right.
was like his whole thing was like training naturally, looking really good as natural, and he was like, "Oh, I want to take things to the next level. Like, I think TRT is a solution for me. I'm going to go down
Sure.
like the drug route." And yeah, like these impressionable kids see this and like, I want to look really good, like
Right.
really fast, like right now. And then
Right.
so they're like,
Which
I need to do this?
and I want to clarify, like I am not actually against in any way enhanced
I agree. Yeah.
competition. I do want to say that I think that because of the impressionality, I don't know,
Yeah.
impressionable nature of youth, we are seeing that same sort of potential negative of personal and body image
Mhm.
because of this widespread image. And you're also starting to see things like uh, uh, people start to get more slender, like that. I'll never forget in 2000, what, 2010, when quote unquote heroin chic was big with young cis women, and you're starting to see that kind of swing back around. So you're seeing this like hyper gotta be muscular gym culture alongside this hyper gotta be super skinny. And so it's I think that's all kind of tied in as well with just like this this falling away from the popularity of veganism is just like
Uh-huh.
it's all just tied into the broad scope of social media and its um effects on culture, its effect on people's minds,
Uh-huh.
and on trends.
Yeah.
Um,
I would love to see
it
some
doesn't
up and
help that.
coming.
We say,
I was just gonna add, I would love to see some up and coming like Gen Z influencers be vegan. That'd be great.
I mean, same. I think the unfortunate side of that is you do have a lot of voices in those ears that are vehemently anti-vegan. For
Yeah,
one
yeah.
reason or another, I couldn't tell you. That might even go back to kind of that gym machismo that I was talking about before, except in this
Yeah.
case, it's not introspective, right? We see it as a very shallow, you have like this is what quote unquote being a man, or this is what being masculine is.
Yeah.
You're gonna eat raw liver, you're gonna get yoked, you're gonna lose all of your hair at the age of 20 because you started TRT at 19. Like, yeah, sure, you're big, dude, but your joints are decaying under the weight of your mass. So
Yeah.
congrats, but Ronnie Coleman can't walk, so you know
Yeah. So
he still
funny.
has
We had
massive
like the
biceps though.
we s- we saw the rise and fall of like Liver King. Like that was
Yeah,
a whole that was so interesting. It's like from a just like examining that, like almost like stepping away and just examining that. It's like really interesting and just weird.
it's I think weird is probably the best way I can describe a lot of that sentiment. I don't know. I look at hyper masculinity in a way that's self-serious like that, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, how is
Yeah.
this the way that you look at the world and perceive things? It's so insular. and it doesn't look at things in any sort of conjoined big picture,
Hmm.
that blows my mind. Everyone that I've seen within that sort of mindset, even if they don't become a liver king or whatever, they're so self-centered and they
Hmm.
exist exclusively within their own bubble. And
Yeah.
anything that threatens the perception of that bubble inside and out is an actual threat. And I think that's where it comes from. Like veganism is a threat, it is a threat
Yeah.
to status quo, it's a threat to normalcy. Um, and anything that is of that idea, anything that can threaten that status quo is something that's an enemy to a lot of these people. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to. Like,
Hmm.
I'm into pro wrestling. Pro wrestling is the ultimate fake hypermasculinity. I remember seeing several people talk about how, uh, in one instance, I watched a talk on Dropout TV. There's a show called Smarty Pants where someone had done a talk on how professional wrestling is drag. I had another friend some years ago do a podcast on how professional wrestling and burlesque are the same thing. And these are the same ideas, right? Uh, Hypermasculinity is something that can be celebrated as long as it's made fun of. It's a joke. It is an absolute joke.
Kind of
And
what the
like,
WWF sort of was in a way, though, right? Like it was so over the top that you can't
it
help
was
but
so
look
over
at
the
it now
top.
and be like, what the hell? Like it's just you can't take it seriously, right?
Like
Like you look at like
look at the Ultimate Warrior. The man would sprint out to the ring, shake the ropes around with his face paint and his tassels, and then he was immediately blown up because he actually couldn't run that fast and his matches were actually terrible. But like it was cool to see because you have this like guy who looks like an action figure, and as a child you're able to take it seriously. As an adult, you don't have to take it seriously because all you're watching is a clown, you know? And that's
I
it.
actually
Just
I've always been interested in WWF specifically because just looking at it now, it's just so insane. It's like you
yeah,
have like that whole made up like beef between like Hulk Hogan and like Macho Man Randy Savage.
yeah,
And then I would just look at the characters that they would portray and just be like, this fucking rules. Like
yeah.
this is so insane. They're just all coked up and roided up, just like yelling, making no sense. Like you got Macho Man being like, I'm the cream of the
He's
crop.
like,
And it's
I'm the
just like this
cream of the
rules.
crop, gonna rise to the top.
Yeah.
It's just it's so good. And like you look at that and you think, wow, this is even if it's not the most sensitive form of masculinity, although Macho Man Randy Savage is an amazing example of sensitive masculinity. If you ever get to look up an interview where he talks about crying,
Yeah, yeah, I
um,
saw that.
do yourself a favor. But like it's it's the moment where it exposes masculinity as a joke. And so now where we're at popularly right now is this form of hyper masculinity that's not only not a joke to people, but it's downright pathetic. If it's not weird, it's pathetic, you
Yeah.
know, because you have these people that are so like stringent on, oh, well, let's just say, for example, that I eat red meat every day. Are the vegan police going to come and kill me? What are they going to do? They're going to blow over in the wind because they don't get any any protein. Well, sorry, Ben Shapiro. Like I could actually throw you into the stratosphere. Like
Yeah. But they would be so
you're
threatened from the idea of that.
I know.
Like they would just shatter. Their ego would just shatter. It just couldn't
It,
handle it.
that's a great point, right? A lot of it is some form of egoism. I don't know. It's just uh yeah, I think that's kind of where to go back. I think that's kind of where veganism has started to shrink, is because now there's just like this growing presence of just for lack of a better way of putting it, just like egotistical macho shit, you know?
Yeah. I
No,
would actually
men
relate
can't
it
be
back
vegan,
to
you know?
Yeah, I would relate it back to insecurity. When I feel like you need to latch on to something that hard that identifies as being like this is the one way you can be a stereotypical masculine guy. It's like you need
Yeah.
to eat red meat, you need to I don't know, be like assertive and like mean or whatever. Like I don't
Right.
know what you'd even associate necessarily, but like when it you latch on that much, I think that it relates back to insecurity a lot because as soon as it's challenged, obviously like these people get defensive. I think these people need to probably just do whatever they want to do and not worry what other people think. And I think that would make them more masculine if they want to be
Yeah.
masculine, whatever. Like I personally don't care what people would identify me as. I just want to do what I think is
Yeah.
cool or what I think is right or whatever. And if people think it's not cool, whatever, I don't give a shit.
You know, it's funny. I think it, with it being this weird insecurity complex, I do think that there's a point where I feel like, especially the big the most insecure, like big juiced up fellas, sometimes I just want to bully them. Be like, yo, why are you such a wimp? Just don't eat meat, you wimp. Right? What's your beef? But I don't do that, especially because that means I'm just gonna get punched in the face and that hurts. So
It's funny, back to that for a quick second. A lot of the dudes who are really big, really jacked, you might think they're really intimidating. Maybe they are, maybe they are kind of classical dicks, whatever. But a lot of times when I meet them, they're actually surprisingly nice.
yeah, it's actually a good point. I singled out big guys, but like yeah, a lot of the bigger fellas are actually usually pretty much teddy bears.
Yeah, it depends. Like there's obviously like the trying to think. The first who popped in my head was that guy Mike Van Wyck, who
Mm,
recently like punched Jeff Nippert in the face or whatever. I don't
yes,
know why. I don't even know how I stumble across this like YouTube bullshit. Like I don't
I
care about it,
forgot
but it
about
just
that.
pops up. Yeah, but like that's the dude who I'm like, okay, this guy obviously is latching on to the title of being like a hyper masculine badass. And like that's really just a dick move. Like why do you gotta punch someone in the face? Like whatever.
Right,
But then a lot of these dudes I meet in real life who look massive, they're lifting a ton of weight. You go up to them, you have a conversation, all of a sudden like they want to help you, they want to have a long conversation, they're really
right.
smiley and happy. It's like that's great, you know? That's
A lot of them
challenging
are
that
also
whole
nerds.
ideology.
I think there's like
Yeah.
I think there's an element of some sort of neurodivergence required to like get that big because you have
Yeah.
to hyper focus sometimes, and
You gotta be a little
I don't.
delusional.
There's got to be something. There's got to be something slightly not normal. Like not everyone's got to have my kind of collection happening here, but uh or you don't always have to be a Dungeons and Dragons nerd, but there's some sort of
There
nerdery
is.
that
There
is
is.
happening for people like that, which I think is why a lot of those bigger dudes especially also have like master's degrees sometimes,
Yeah.
or they'll like straight up, PhDs or some sort of like I don't know, PhD is probably not the right degree. Whatever a science doctor is.
I know what you mean. I was
Doc
actually just
sci.
having this conversation with my girlfriend the other day. We were just talking about how a lot of, like you just said, a lot of jack dudes or dudes who are really into lifting, or girls, whatever. A lot of times they love like Dragon Ball Z. They love
Yeah.
other video games and stuff too. And it's just like I always find this crossover where like I think I'm the weird one out because like I've always been into lifting. I've always been into nerdy stuff and I'll have a conversation and they'll be like, "Oh, you watch Dragon Ball Z? You watch I don't know, like you Jujutsu Kaisen, like other anime and stuff." And I'm like, "Hell yeah." And we have this full conversation. All of a sudden we're like best friends.
That's so funny. Like, yeah, I bought a year pass to Crunchyroll.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I don't understand what exactly the crossover is, but it's definitely a thing.
I wonder if it's more of a generational thing as well. Like, we're starting
Could
to
be, yeah.
see that uh, there was an old guard where they never interacted with nerdy stuff. And then as we kind of were kids, it was a little bit more widespread for us. Like, we had Pokemon that got a lot of us into anime in some way, right? It was like
Yeah.
Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, or late
Yu-Gi-Oh!
night on the like God, what channel was it?
Toonami.
It was probably like yeah, no, like before Toonami, there was like I want to say they called it like a Japanimation block. Before anime was even a term, you could watch like Trigun and
Oh,
Gundam
yeah.
on like a sci-fi channel late at night, and so that was like some people's uh uh exposure to anime, and so we all kind of watched that, and then we had the kids versions of it with
Yeah,
Dragon
yeah,
Ball Z and
yeah. Yeah.
Toonami existed, and so we all like came up with nerd stuff. And then, Lord of the Rings came out and The Matrix, like those movies, and Harry Potter was big. Like we were able to be nerds popularly. I
Yeah.
think there's the idea of the nerdy geek kind of fell to the wayside, although it does still exist.
It's kind of
It's
cool
just
now. It's funny. Like you
yeah,
see like rappers and stuff wearing all like this anime gear and like
yeah.
talking about all these animes. It's kind of cool. It's funny. It's like I go to my sister's really into she does like permanent makeup and like hair and stuff for a
Hmm.
living. She loves doing like cosplay. So like I'll go
Oh,
to conventions with her here and there. It's funny. It's like you see a lot of people who you would look at on the street and be like, "Oh, this person's like really fashionable. They look really cool." And then you see them there and like they're like just normal people, you know? Like it's not like anyone's like really that weird or anything. They're all pretty fucking cool.
I love when I get a reel on Instagram that's like it's like interviews at a convention or something, and they'll just go up and say, "What are you cosplaying as, and what do you do as your day job?" And they're like,
Yeah.
"Day trader,
Accountant.
model.
Yeah.
I'm in, I'm in like tech. I'm a school teacher. I'm a barber. Stuff like that. It really is all walks, and I think the
Yeah.
same kind of goes for fitness, where yeah, some of us just like we just discovered lifting weights. You know, some of us
Yeah,
just want to
exactly.
get big. What do they
Yeah,
say?
exactly.
Lift big, get buried in a big coffin,
Oh,
something like that. Like,
I actually don't know if I ever heard that, but that sounds
feel like
cool.
there's a step
I can
that
get
I'm
down with
missing
that.
in the buried part. I think you're supposed to die big, but I can never remember where that
Hell
fits
yeah.
in.
Just stay jacked into your 80s and 90s and then just die a monster.
It's
Actually, if
all.
you die
It's
a
all I can hope for.
yeah, if you die a mass monster, you're probably going at like 45.
Yeah, yeah, it happens a lot. It happens a lot. Your bones just
Yeah.
can't make it.
Yeah, your heart just shuts out.
Yeah,
All right, we've been going for like an hour and 20 or so. Just for the
Lord.
sake of keeping this manageable in terms of editing and just general podcast time. Maybe we should start kind of wrapping things up a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah,
I'd love to hear about like what your future goals are with powerlifting or athletic goals or personal goals, whatever. If you'd be okay with sharing that.
yeah. So my personal goals for the future, especially with powerlifting, I can give you what my next year is hoping to look like. I'm 36, so for some powerlifting federations, that means I am in the submaster age class. I'm
Mhm.
really hoping to be able to hit some state records with the USPA Pennsylvania
Mhm.
um, in the coming months if I can. That would be great because that feels like an actual legitimate record that people are going to see and recognize versus some other ones that I hold that I'm just like, that doesn't feel so great.
Mhm.
But I would love to accompany the Vegan Strong PlantBuilt team again at the end of this year with whatever. If we end up at Mr. America, if we do another expo, that would be great. Whichever, I would just love to be with the team again. Um,
Yeah.
I think my hope for the sport as a whole is just keep going. I've got kind of like a 5 year plan of becoming a masters athlete in the sport once I turn 40 and
Mhm.
uh, hopefully making it to some sort of worlds. I would love to become a worlds competitor in powerlifting as a master. I don't think I have that ability at this age, but if I stay healthy with it, then that should be it. And then, um, personally, I think I'm always trying to uh, do more for the animals. I've started to work with some local animal rights organizations in Philadelphia, but also I'm trying to do more for humans as well. So, as much as I can, I'm trying to help out in Philadelphia. We have a pretty harsh and widespread. It's not a fentanyl problem anymore. Now it's what they call tranq, which is a
Yeah.
type of horse tranquilizer that has entered. the drug market. And Philadelphia also has one of the widest disparities between the impoverished and the, we'll say, fortunate
Hmm.
in the country. And so there's a lot of organizations in Philadelphia that are threatened by the current mayoral administration as well as the incoming presidential administration. So I think I'm just going to spend the next few years doing as much as I can for the people in my surrounding community, as well as the animals that could use it the most, which is to say, all of them.
That's great. Yeah, Philly definitely has a problem with the trank stuff lately. It's really crazy. And firsthand, just coming back and forth to Philly and not seeing it too much, but then coming back all of a sudden and going into
Hmm.
like an area that's kind of like, all of a sudden
Yeah,
you're like, I shouldn't be here. This looks really bad. And then you go like
yeah.
a few blocks and all of a sudden it's like a bunch of like polo wearing yuppies. It's
Yes, yeah.
crazy.
I legitimately that is the neighborhood in which I live, and it's unfortunately sad because the clientele that I have at the business that I operate is largely, we'll say, comfortable to affluent.
Yeah, sure.
And the way that they refer to people within their own city who are sick with addiction is very disheartening for me to hear. So I think, on top of what I can do to actually spread good to those who need it, I would love to spend some time like destigmatizing the uh, unhoused, the at risk, the impoverished,
Yeah.
and the addicted in my city, because you know it doesn't help to call people who are struggling zombies,
Yeah, I
right?
know,
Which is
for
a thing
sure.
that I see people do all the time. There's a lot of dehumanizing that happens,
Yeah.
and uh I would love to humanize the humans and
Yeah. Mhm.
animalize the animals. I'll work on that.
I totally agree. I think that's great. As someone who's had friends who have been lost to addiction before, I can say firsthand, a lot of these people, they just have unfortunate circumstances and they either have been or still are really great people. And we
Hmm.
gotta make sure that they're treated that way and not necessarily just, don't just call them like zombies or whatever, like they're people, they could be great people. It just could be a very unfortunate circumstance.
Yeah.
So that's great. I really appreciate that you're doing all that. That's amazing.
Thank
And
you.
just to not end on a more negative note here,
Yeah.
do you want to shout out maybe any social media stuff for yourself?
Yeah.
Anywhere people can find you and connect with you, maybe keep up with anything that you're doing in terms of like humanitarian or vegan related stuff?
Yeah, so if you want to keep up with my social media, I am trying to post more about that stuff. It is vinsta.gramphany on Instagram, and my barber shop, we do a little bit through the shop as well. Is vinniesbarber.shop. It's Vinnie's with an IES dot shop on Instagram, but also check out Vegan Strong Tea and check out PlantBuilt, check out Switch, the number 4, and then Good on Instagram as well, because you don't need dairy to be a good athlete. I think
And
that's
plants
right.
have all the protein they need.
Plants have all the protein you need to be happy, healthy, and strong. There's
Hell
another
yeah.
bumper that I think I should have memorized, but I've forgotten it.
Those are two big ones. I think we got
Yeah, yeah,
it.
sick.
Cool. All right. Anything else you want to add before we close out, Vinny?
That is all. I really appreciate you having me on
Awesome.
today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you
Awesome.
so much. And for anyone listening, thank you guys for listening to the episode, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Vinny, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Aethix Approach podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, I'd really appreciate if you gave the podcast a follow anywhere where you're listening to this and dropping a review if you liked it. Please also feel free to check out the Aethix Approach website for additional content, including coaching services, free training programs, articles, and merch, as well as the Aethix Fitness YouTube. Feel free to also check out my personal fitness Instagram, which can be found at Tofu Strong, for updates and even more content. And of course, dropping a like, commenting, and sharing is always hugely appreciated and is a quick, easy, and free way to help me producing more content like this. Thank you so much again to my Aethix Fitness community. Much love, as always, and I'll see you again in the next episode soon. Peace out.